Coogs house. The Houston Cougars have a really challenging non-conference schedule in basketball this year, but one of those games got a whole lot different looking. Coaching change. Bruce Pearl is out at Auburn.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether a Houston fan or just a hater came step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day, as you do each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. We might even be your second listen today, as a bonus episode comes out breaking down some significant scheduling changes, kind of for Houston. Houston plays Auburn November 16th in Birmingham, Alabama. A home and home of sorts for Auburn coming to Houston to play in the Toyota Center last year. And that game dramatically changed on Monday when Bruce Pearl retired. I want to talk about some of the retirement, some of the fallout for Houston, as this was a big game for them on their non-conference slate. Also want to somewhat subtly look at that 30-day transfer window that just opened up. I don't think Houston's going to get into that. We'll see what could happen on that front. Now, Bruce Pearl retires I want to say suddenly. I will say that there had been conversations back in May about Bruce Pearl potentially running for Senate in Alabama. Tommy Tuberville stepping down, another sports name in the Senate, for whatever that's worth. And Bruce Pearl has been more vocal about his opinions on social media. Regardless of what those opinions may be, it's not really the point. The point is he is a more politically involved person. I think it stands to reason that he was legitimately talking to people and doing about what the money raising would look like, what his personal investment would look like, what the probabilities were, etc. And he suddenly retires on Monday, September 22nd. Now, I should point out, in a 14-minute and change video that he put out in conjunction with Auburn and his family is very much prominent in the video, he stated explicitly that he was not running for Senate in this election cycle. I want to stress, in this election cycle. However, he will continue to work at Auburn. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that role looks like, but it looks like some sort of an administrative type of role within the athletic department, basketball specific. The coaching job is being passed on to his son, Stephen Pearl, and for what it's worth, his son has been his highest ranking assistant the last couple of years and has kind of worked his way up since changing careers himself back in 2014. And while I'm sure people on the Locked On Auburn and Zach Blackerby show will be chiming in the comment section below about what they think about that move, or on the Locked On College Basketball show about what they think about having your son be kind of forced into the interim role for the full year because you retire in September, that's not necessarily the point today. The point today, I guess, for Houston is that one of the biggest games on their schedule was to get to play this Bruce Pearl Auburn team. Bruce Pearl, I mentioned it on Twitter. If you look at his resume, he has been at 4 different Division I institutions. And it is very probable that he's the greatest coach in the history, on the men's side at least, of all 4 of them. He's a legend in the game. Part of the sales pitch of Auburn and Houston in Toyota Center and in Birmingham was getting this coaching matchup. These are he and Kelvin Sampson are the 2 of the old school legends of this game. You throw in Rick Barnes. You used to call Bill Self. They've had some trouble at Kansas as of late, but his resume from before those troubles speaks for itself. Right, a handful of guys with that kind of air, Izzo and guys like that, right? And suddenly, one of those guys is retiring. And now I look at Bruce Pearl's retirement, and look, that was the greatest season in Auburn history last season. And while they did beat Houston along the way in the earliest stages of that season, finish in the Final Four, I'm sure he thought they had a really good chance, and they did have a really good chance to be cutting nets down. They were ahead of Florida in that game, and much like Florida beat Houston in the final, Florida came back at the end. It wasn't quite as nip and tuck in down the stretch for Auburn, or for Florida against Auburn, I should say, but fairly similar outcome just a round earlier. Look, he's a great basketball coach that's done a lot of great things at Auburn. And for Houston, um, I don't think you'd have signed up for this if you'd have known that Bruce Pearl was only going to be coaching in one of the two games. Now, Bruce Pearl is a great coach. He built Auburn into a great program and thing. I don't know that you'd have taken a year without him if you were signing up for this home and home of sorts, or this neutrally home and neutrally home of sorts, right? And so it is interesting that this is right before the season starts. That game is less than 2 months away at this point. Schools are starting official practices this week. Coaches retreats have happened. Um, and I feel like, frankly, if Auburn takes a dive this season as part of the rebuild and reconfiguring without Bruce Pearl at the helm, that hurts a non-conference game for Houston in a way that I felt confident about Houston going into the season with Bruce Pearl as the Auburn coach. I felt confident about Houston going into every game they got on the schedule for its worth. I think this is a really strong team this year. But the non-conference schedule for Houston did just take a hit, I think, and that Stephen Pearl and coaching Auburn will be in a little bit different situation. And they probably, I mean, statistically, it was not probable they were going to be as strong a program as they were last year. They were almost as old as the Oklahoma City Thunder, actually, if you looked at their average ages, but lost a lot to graduations and stuff like that. But they did bring in some four-star talents from JUCO and high school ranks. They brought back to Todd Pettiford, a highly touted guard that we saw up close and in person. Yeah, his coming out party was Houston in a lot of ways last November, but he opted to not go into the NBA draft to come back and play another year, presumably for Bruce Pearl. And now that program is in a little bit different spot, a different look for that program, right? Now, Houston has a decently strong non-conference anyway. Florida State is on that schedule. Arkansas is on that schedule. You're going to get Syracuse, Tennessee, and a third good team in the NIL Players Era Classic in Las Vegas. Lots of good games. But this Auburn one was kind of a tent pole of it. It was one you knew about for a long time at this point. It was one you kind of were banking on being a strong non-conference game. And it's not going to be the same. I've argued on the show before that the Big 12 schedule, which should come out Tuesday, as far as dates goes concerned, the Big 12 schedule should be out Tuesday. I've argued the Big 12, in terms of their matrix, did not do Houston any favors. If you flip-flop the home and away splits for Houston, they might have 5 or 6 more quad one games. And that's a big deal when you're looking at resumes at the end of the year. Instead, they get their tough teams at home and their not so tough teams on the road, which is better for your probability of winning those games. But if you're Houston, you thought you had a pretty good probability of winning them all anyway. And so now that impacts you there. You have this hitting you in the non-conference. I'm not saying it does not come down to just got to win the games, Parker. I totally get that argument. I am saying that there are going to be several teams with resumes of over 32 wins next season, or I guess that'll be post. So of over 27 wins next season that are looking for one seeds in March. Houston's got the opportunity to play as a one seed with a South Regional coming through the Toyota Center. That is a real opportunity. And you want the strongest schedule you have, the strongest schedule you can have, because ultimately you want to have some say in getting yourself to the Toyota Center for the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight. And then you let the chips fall where they may. And you want the toughest schedule you can because you've got a great team, returning 3 players from a national finalist. You're bringing in a top recruiting class and multiple guys inside the top 20 in that class. You really hope that Auburn can be better. And this feels like it hurts that program in the most immediate future. One way it could hurt that program is in players leaving. We'll talk about what that could look like for Auburn and if Houston could stand to benefit on the inverse from that in 1 second. Before we get too far, today's show is brought to you as a bonus show by our buddies over at Square. Now, listen, your neighborhood runs in Square even if you don't realize it. There are certain businesses that truly make neighborhoods feel like home, whether it's local sports bar, coffee shop, corner deli. It's been there for decades. These places bring people together. Neighborhood businesses thrive, and that's when the whole neighborhood thrives. Over in Houston, you've got Cochinita and Company, a great Mexican food spot They are running on Square, been running on Square since they were a small independent shop back in 2016. Blown up brick and mortar, gotten much bigger, and the whole nine, all thanks to running their business through Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go to support your favorite neighborhood spot, and you'll be happy that you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time, because college football's back in action. NFL football's back in action with the end of the baseball season around the corner. Tailgates, rivalries, everything is happening in all stands all over Houston, and the Cougars might be the best show in town. There's nothing like it, but let's be real, getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the games themselves, and queues, hidden fees, ticket prices jumping at checkout. Right now, you pull up Game Time, they can fix that problem. Why we use Game Time here? The Game Time app helps give you the advantage back to you as a fan, gives you the advantage back, gets you the advantage as a fan. It's the easiest way to score last minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can get into Houston and Texas Tech right now for less than $80. You can get down in the lower bowl for reasonable prices as well. All kinds of great deals. Check the zones and things like that. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets. Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Parker Ainsworth, Locked on Coogs here. And the last bit about this Auburn story that could impact Houston is that with Bruce Pearl retiring on Monday, the 22nd, Auburn's players, their entire roster, has 30 days from Tuesday, September 23rd, to leave that program and join another. Now, I should point out academically, they need to enroll in that school and get caught up. Most schools have started classes. That'd be kind of hard to pull off. It's not impossible to pull off. It would be hard to pull off before the mid-year. Now, with basketball season, that means you'd be back enrolled by conference play. That may be more important to some programs. But before I look at like names in that roster, and I got two worth keeping an eye on, I would point out that this is why when we talk about roster construction, we say Kelvin Sampson always keeps a 14th spot or a 15th spot open. He only keeps 14 on his roster. These kind of situations are those kinds of situations. These are the reasons why you do that. People question it, and Sampson's been around the block. I think at some point people are going to learn to stop questioning Sampson, but Sampson's been around the block. You keep a spot open because you just never know. And truthfully, of the 14 guys he's got, they probably redshirt one or two. And I can see in my comment section right now lighting up at why they're not playing the other 12 enough minutes. Anyone, right? And so ultimately, the idea of playing a 15th guy would, not be so great anyway. So keep the spot open because you just never know. And now a top tier program, a program with guys legitimately looking at the NBA, is without a coach, and those players are eligible to leave. Obviously, the cream of the crop here would be Todd Pettiford. We mentioned in the first segment of this bonus episode of Locked On Cougs, he entered the draft combine process, opted to return back to Auburn. Now, he could have gone anywhere in America when he came back out of the draft combine process. He could have gone legit, like throw a dart at the dartboard, pick a school. He could have gone there. He is an electric scorer, a great point guard, and a competitive defender. You have to wonder if he opted to come back to Auburn to play for Pearl. And I don't mean Steven. I think it's worth asking. I also think it's worth asking for what it's worth. If, when you look at Todd Pettiford, if Houston would want to add another rotational guard. We know that ultimately, one of the things Kelvin Sampson says about freshmen is the best thing about them is that they turn into sophomores, right? It is kind of antithetical to his ways to play a bunch of freshmen, but he has a bunch of freshmen this year that feel like they've got to get in the rotation. Would you talk about like bringing in a competitive sophomore into Todd Pettiford to play a portion of the year at a high level in your backcourt. I think, if I'm being honest, the Houston culture is set fairly strongly. I think it's set in I don't know that they necessarily want to bring that kind of a spot in. I think they feel pretty good and have reason to feel pretty good about what they've got in the backcourt. What I do think is interesting is actually a guy that we've never seen play for Auburn before, and that is four-star prospect, top 75 prospect, Sebastian Williams-Adams. Sebastian Williams-Adams went to St. John's in the city of Houston and chose Auburn over a couple of schools. Houston made one of his top lists, but not his final top list. Houston was interested in recruiting the guy early on in his high school career. Houston was interested for a number of reasons. Houston's in his backyard. Sebastian Williams-Adams was going to probably be on the floor a lot as a rotational piece as Auburn on Auburn this year. And ultimately, if he chose Houston as a true freshman, he could still hold on to his redshirt the year, and not miss half of a season through the transfer rules from now, right? Because he could leave that program immediately and enroll at Houston as best he could, as quickly as he could. But not have to worry about missing games in the first half of the year, because he could just take a freshman redshirt and ultimately be a part of, kind of quasi part of, the class of 2026 for Houston in a weird way. Sebastian Williams-Adams is a 6'7", 6'8" wing guy with great creativity. He's a really good scorer. Played with John Lucas 3, JL3 elite in the Houston area. And really, when you look at his, it was kind of a shocker to some, I think, that he picked Auburn. They were in his top 4, so I don't mean to say like they didn't come out of nowhere or anything like that. It wasn't this team, you hadn't been on this team's radar the whole time or anything, but it certainly was a shocker that he left Texas and all the great programs in Texas to go play at Auburn. Would it behoove Houston to look at bringing him back to be your 15th guy, your redshirt guy? Would not throw off your roster this year. He is a hometown kid. He'd redshirt this year. He'd be a part of your 2026 class, kind of. Would get a kid out of a situation that's a lot of unknowns into a situation with a lot of knowns. And again, they were recruiting him early on. That jumps out to me as a kid that is from Houston. I think that makes a lot of sense. But if you see other aspects of that roster that may be worth kicking the tires on or asking about, tell me in the comments down below. Today's show is brought to you by a bunch of buddies, including our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Keep checking out things at the Locked On Coogs channel. Hit subscribe and hit the bell so you know we're live. This was supposed to be a week all about Corvallis, Oregon, and things keep happening in other aspects of the world. So we'll be talking about all of those things as well each and every day here at Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast. Now that your team every day, go Coogs.